Radiovision, The Yellow Cruise in the Footsteps of Marco Polo. A program by Maxime Boudet. From April 1931 to February 1932, an extraordinary adventure captivates the world, the Citroën Central Asia Expedition. About 40 men and 14 half-tracks attempt to establish a link between the Mediterranean and the China Sea, following in the footsteps of Marco Polo on the Silk Road used by ancient Eastern caravans. This is the Yellow Cruise. Separated into two groups, the Pamir group, which left from Beirut, and the China group, which left from Beijing, who are to meet in Xinjiang, the expedition will cover 12,000 kilometers at the cost of a constant struggle. André Cécillon and Robert Comte, a mechanic in each of the two groups, recount for us this great adventure that was the Yellow Expedition.
What was the Yellow Cruise?
It was, if you will, the last stage of the trilogy launched by Citroën. So we had the colonial empire at the time, and from there came the first crossing of the Sahara in 1922 to 1923.
Afterwards, there was the Black Cruise, which involved a complete penetration of Africa.
And the Yellow Cruise.
And the Yellow Cruise was planned to connect Beirut to Beijing. So it was necessary to retrace Marco Polo's route. From there, it required us to leave Beirut, cross Syria, then Iraq, Persia, or Iran, as it is now, Afghanistan, the British Indies at that time, Kashmir, and cross the Himalayas to reach China through Chinese Turkestan.
At that time, it was a very great adventure.
It was exploration, discovery, adventure by necessity to get there.
The cars were specially designed for this journey.
These are cars that had proven themselves in previous missions in Africa, even in the snow.
That's right. They were equipped with tracks.
Yes. Instead of being propelled by rear wheels, it was a track that rolled on the ground. Wheels at the front, right wheels at the front, and the track drive at the back. That is to say, it allowed it to overcome almost all obstacles.
And this roll, what is it?
Well, this roller was a crossing roller. The roller would engage and lift the entire car before the wheels would touch the ground again.
They were comfortable cars.
Comfortable, if you can say that. These were cars designed for an expedition, and then everything was planned for the passengers, so they could take notes. Everything was within reach inside. They might not have been very, very comfortable, but very functional. The trailer was a bit special because the armor served as a mast for the tent. Upon arrival at each stage, everyone started setting up the tent. Or that wasn't quite true, because the first task upon arriving at the camp was to set up the radio mast, and everyone participated. We had a telescopic mast that was 30 meters high. And then afterwards we set up the tents, and then we took out the luggage. So there were our beds. The beds fit in a box that was 90 centimeters long. There was the bed itself with its legs. There was a mattress, a blanket, a waterproof sheet to cover it. We had a mosquito net and we had a hood for the head.
André Cécillon, on April 4th, 1931, you left Beirut for the Pamir, and there, right from the start, you had to cross deserts.
We had to cross the Syrian desert to Iraq. These were roads, meaning dirt roads, very dusty. The caravan journey was difficult, you know, because of the dust.
And it was hot too.
Ah, it was hot, so there. We took the route that Darius had taken long before us.
And Marco Polo.
And Marco Polo, and then after Tehran, we reached the region of the Duhai Plateaus over Persia.
Mashhad, which is the second holy city of Islam, there is a forbidden mosque. It's the road to Afghanistan. It was the road to Afghanistan where we entered at the Isam Kalai post.
And this part of the journey presented no difficulty.
No, because the equipment had been proven in the African deserts and all that. The caterpillar, it wasn't even shifting sands that could slow its progress. In Afghanistan, the first city crossed is Herat. It's the crossroads of the roads of Persia and India. Yes, it is the entry for penetration into India. Herat, it is a fortified city. There is a sensational bazaar, a bustling life. You had to see that. The bazaar, it's... the bazaar is the souk. The souk is African, the bazaar is Asian.
In Afghanistan, there were no more roads, just tracks. Ah, well, they were tracks, dusty tracks, tracks more or less wide.
There were no major difficulties in terms of traffic except for the rivers. Afghanistan is bordered to the north by the Hindu Kush range, which is an extension of the Himalayas. At the time we passed through, it was the melting snow that fed the stream, so we had to look for fords. That means we had to pull the cars through the water.
Yes, because the water depth was too great.
When the car had reached the other bank, the mechanic would immediately start draining the engine, getting the car back in shape, and ensuring there were no traces of water, and refilling the oil. And as soon as it could run, the passage of the following cars was done by direct traction, pulling with cables.
And did you cross many rivers like that? We crossed, I believe, 7 in 1 week.
Upon your entry into India, the English army had a surprise for you.
When we crossed the border, we first discovered a paved road parallel to a railway track. And then, I don't know, a few hundred hours later, we discovered a plateau that was the Khyber Pass, with the Scots and their bagpipes, the Sites at attention, the Gurkhas from Nepal at attention, and we marched past those people. And from there, you practically found paved roads up to Peshawar, because in Peshawar, the families of the entire staff who were at the Khyber Pass were staying. It was somewhat the headquarters of the Northern India Army staff, if you will. But beyond Peshawar, towards Srinagar, to go up to Kashmir, there were narrow roads, there were stone-paved roads where you had to make your way through because the traffic is so heavy. There was also slow traffic of carts pulled by skinny cows, and by that road we arrived in Srinagar. Srinagar being the capital of Kashmir, we were received by the Maharaja. On these roads, you had no traffic difficulty. Where a cart with oxen moves, the auto chenille is on a highway there. So, we arrived there as well. Another difficulty in the middle of the monsoon. So it rains. The river was in floods. It delayed us a bit in our preparation.
The first slopes of the Himalayas were about 20 kilometers from Srinagar.
From Srinagar, the slopes of the Himalayas began.
The ascent then, it was the adventure for a month and a half, the great adventure. Difficult passages, the bridges to build and pieces of rock to blast because there wasn't enough width to prepare the path. But we only left with 2 cars. We abandoned the trailers. So to carry the bed, our suitcases, we formed pony caravans. The paths became narrower and narrower. That is to say, only trails for ponies. In the turns, for example, the car was in a hairpin position. On one side, it was stuck trying to turn, and on the other side, it couldn't maneuver because it was the void. We lifted the car with a jack, and by pushing, we aimed to make it pivot. We had about 10 centimeters to maneuver.
Crossing the bridges was sometimes a delicate operation.
Well, that is to say, we had shaky bridges. When a pony crossed them, the bridge would start to sway. And every time we found a shaky bridge, we had to unload our cars. And even better, we had unloaded the cars, passed the equipment by hand like that, with coolies, and not all together, one by one, because we couldn't overload. And to get the car across, we had a rope that we had attached to the steering wheel. And then the coolies pulled, and we steered the wheel like that with the rope.
And there was no one in the car?
There was no one in the car. And then the bridge, it was twisting.
And to cross the Bozil Pass, you encountered snow.
As we climbed, it was snow. And to climb from there, we even had to change the cylinder head on each car to compensate for power loss at altitude. In terms of slope, it climbed very, very well. The only thing that bothered us was the sideways slope. And in the snow, we dug a small groove to lower the wheel that was on the elevated part of the slope. But then upon reaching the top, it was easier because it was very wide at the pass, and we crossed the Bozil Pass. There was still a height of 3 or 4 meters of snow.
And the trucks performed well.
In terms of progress, it was going well. In fact, we took a short day to climb the Bozil Pass from 2005 to 4002 while changing a cylinder head again.
And it was during the descent that you experienced your greatest emotion.
Yes, it was a difficult passage at the foot of this small ledge climb. So, as always, it happened to us about 10 times a day, and we had said it will be tight, but it will pass. We had sent knocked down all the stones that were sticking out, all the rock. I start off and I was gradually climbing. All of a sudden, I feel the car tipping, and then I hear brrr. I stopped immediately. I can tell you, I saw the car. It wasn't upright, you know. So I moved to the rock side while I was on the empty side, and I went down gently. Apparently, I turned pale.
The track collapsed under the Caterpillar.
Oh, yes, the track collapsed. It still took a good 5 hours to pull that out.
And at one point, the cars could no longer pass.
Absolutely, absolutely. The ground was moraine terrain, if you will. So there was barely a path. There might have been 50 meters, but it was moraine terrain. It was earth, all that it couldn't hold.
So we dismantled the cars one by one, and 4 of them carried the chassis, but it wasn't easy to move forward. And when everything arrived, we started to
Reassemble the cars, and then it started again.
And so you arrived in Gilgit.
Yes, had learned that the point group in China was being held prisoner in Urumqi. So the boss decided to set off in a horse caravan, and we accompanied them to Nomel. It was while going up the Kilik Pass.
Who was making the passage with China?
Robert Comte, you were a mechanic in the China group, so you left from Beijing.
We left Tianjin on April 6, 1931.
And there you took the road due west.
We went around Beijing, if you will, from the north up to the Great Wall.
And then it's the track.
If though it's the track, yes, it's the track of the pet road, that's it.
And from there you began the crossing of the Gobi Desert. What distance does that represent?
That represents about 2,000 kilometers. 2,000 kilometers that were covered, always at forced march.
And it was in the Toksun Pass, here at the border of China and India, that the China group and the Pamir group joined.
The meeting, if you will, of Hart and Victor Point, the commander of the China group, took place right in the Toksun Pass. It was a pass that was quite well known since Marco Polo had traveled that route. So they went back up to Urumqi for the return.
To be able to return to Beijing?
To return to the journey back to Beijing, since all our passports were confiscated.
And in the Gobi Desert you head back to Beijing? Yeah, the cars were specially modified.
To withstand the cold this time?
Yes, since these cars were designed for the heat. We had to modify them, protect the radiators from freezing, and at the same time do what was necessary to heat the cabins. We left with snow, let's say around 0 degrees, and the further we went into winter, at that time, the more the temperature started to drop. We didn't have antifreeze, which forced us to keep the engines running continuously and to have a watch service, if you will, to warm up, to maintain the temperatures of all the cars. We didn't let them cool down.
What is that tree on the trailer?
Each time we passed by a camel post where there were some trees, if there was any dead wood, it was collected by our Chinese cooks to heat the tea or something warm. Nothing was wasted, everything was collected.
Did you often encounter wheels?
We found a few, but we had to count on between 150 and 200 kilometers to find a well. We had to break the ice around it because these wells are quite deep. I believe the average is between 25 and 30 meters, so we had water, which was necessary, if you will, for drinking and food. We only made stops at that time to pick up supplies that were deposited in Catholic congregations. The cities were completely hostile. There was this civil war that could already exist between Muslims and Buddhists, if you will. We were warned that we were entering a bandit zone, and we were attacked by a group of looters.
February 12th, 1932 is a memorable date.
Yes, for us, because it was the end of a nightmare. We were arriving, after all, in civilization, so to speak, and for us it was the end of the desert.
That's right. You had arrived in Beijing?
We had arrived in Beijing. That was our goal.
And the yellow cruise was over.
Yes, that is to say, one thing must be said, which is that the Gobi was crossed. It was one more desert added after the deserts of Africa, and then an almost successful attempt in the Himalayas.
Could an expedition of this kind be considered and done again today?
I don't see the usefulness now. A desert is no longer a desert now. There is a connection from Urumqi, Beijing by highway, railway, and now, of course, by air.
The Yellow Cruise will still remain one of the great memories of your life.
Oh, of course, those are things you never forget. You can't forget them. To start again now, it would be difficult.
It was the Yellow Cruise following in the footsteps of Marco Polo, a program produced with the assistance of the Citroën Company Archives and with the participation of André Cessillon and Robert Comte. Technical collaboration are André Barthes, Christian Axpi,